Once a beacon of South Africa's industrial might, Eskom is now a struggling giant, overwhelmed by mismanagement, political games, and corruption. The company's debt has now grown over $23 billion, more than Botswana's GDP. As the debt grows, so do power outages, costing the South African economy billions each year. The stakes are high, and the price of failure could be catastrophic, because the financial burden has not only jeopardized the company's stability, but has also cast a shadow over South Africa's economic future. How did the country's biggest power provider fall so far, and can it be saved from its financial troubles? In this first episode out of 3, we will focus on Eskom debt crisis in great details, the context, the revenue challenges, the inefficiencies, and the debt itself. Let's get to it. At one point in time, Eskom was Africa's largest power utility, generating nearly 95% of South Africa's electricity and approximately 45% of the continent's total power supply. Founded in 1923, the company was initially established to unify South Africa's fragmented electricity supply. Over time, it grew into a critical public utility, driven by a mandate to provide electricity in the public interest, rather than to maximize profit. After the end of apartheid, Eskom's mission shifted significantly. The company launched efforts to bring electricity to previously underserved areas, transforming access for millions of South Africans. As a result, electrification rates surged from around 36% in 1994 to nearly 90% by the mid-2000s. This rapid expansion played a major role in driving economic growth, making Eskom a foundational part of South Africa's infrastructure. Its influence was particularly strong in critical sectors like mining and industry, where reliable power is essential. However, in 1998, a government white paper on energy policy noted that Eskom's surplus capacity would be exhausted by around 2007. And sure enough, by 2007, this prediction came true. South Africa began experiencing power shortages. This marked a turning point in Eskom's story, shifting the company's trajectory and revealing new challenges ahead. To address capacity issues, Eskom launched 2 major projects, the Kusile and Medupi power stations. Ambitious initiatives aimed to significantly expand electricity generation. Unfortunately, both projects were plagued by mismanagement, budget overruns, and technical flaws, leading to repeated delays and soaring costs. Eskom's heavy reliance on coal added further financial pressure. Rising coal prices and years of underfunded maintenance only worsened the situation, as aging infrastructure became increasingly costly to operate and repair. By the 2010s, Eskom's situation had deteriorated further. The company's debt burden ultimately climbed to over $23 billion, underscoring the depth of the utility's fiscal challenges. The vicious cycle of Eskom was now in place and in full effect. So, as infrastructure aged and operation costs mounted, cracks began to show, setting the stage for serious revenue challenges. Load shedding severely affects Eskom's revenue generation. When it occurs, the company must halt electricity sales to maintain grid stability, losing potential revenue and incurring higher cost from running open-cycle gas turbines to meet demand in peak hours. This unsustainable financial model has created yet another vicious cycle for Eskom. Reduced sales lower the revenue base, and this shortage then forces it to bear high operational costs to prevent the system from collapsing. To avoid and reduce load shedding, Eskom spent $1.6 billion on diesel in 2023, yet its sales volume continues to decline steadily. At least this situation is seen as unsustainable by management. To cope with Eskom's inconsistent power supply, both commercial and residential users began to turn to alternative energy sources, mainly solar and backup generators. This shift towards alternative energy sources has far-reaching consequences for Eskom. As consumers and businesses increasingly turn to independent power solutions, the demand for electricity from the company's grid steadily declines. This directly translates to lower revenue for Eskom. And so, the dwindling income stream exacerbates Eskom's already precarious financial situation. With less money coming in, the company struggles to cover its operational costs, which include essential maintenance and upgrades to its aging infrastructure. More importantly, the reduced revenue further hampers Eskom's ability to service its substantial debt burden. To address these shortfalls, the company has consistently sought substantial tariff increases from the National Energy Regulator of South Africa. The proposed tariff hikes have been notably high, up to 36% for direct customers and 43% for municipal customers for the 2025 financial year. These increases are significantly above the country's inflation rate, which stood at 4.4% in 2023 and have met with widespread public opposition. The regulator has often approved lower increases than those requested by Eskom, and so for the 2025 financial year, an increase of 12% was approved. While Eskom argues that cost-reflective tariffs are essential for covering operational costs and service its debts, steep increases risk driving more consumers to alternative energy sources, further eroding its customer base and revenue. In the mining and manufacturing sectors, historically the largest consumers of Eskom's electricity, operators face heightened production costs and reduced output due to power instability. Here, the interconnectedness of energy reliability and economic health is in full display. South Africa is renowned for housing some of the most intelligent and innovative minds on the continent. This shows in the strategic decisions undertaken by numerous companies operating within the country, from Shoprite, Tiger Brand, and Bidvest to MTN, South African Airways, and MultiChoice. With a workforce of more than 30,000 employees, Eskom is well positioned to leverage this invaluable human resource. The organization has the potential to address its challenges effectively and efficiently through strong management and leadership decisions, enabling gradual yet significant improvements in its operations, right? Two of South Africa's biggest power plant projects have cost taxpayers over $17 billion, and yet they're still not fully operational. The power utility is so pivotal to the country that its numerous missteps ripple across the entire economy. Delays, breakdowns, and lost investments are not just company problems, they turn into national crisis. The Medupi and Kusile power plant projects, originally intended to bolster South Africa's power capacity, have become cautionary tales of budget mismanagement and chronic delays. The Medupi power plant was initially projected to cost around $4.5 billion and completed by 2012. The project ended up exceeding $9 billion in cost and reached full operational status in 2021, nearly a decade behind schedule. Just 2 weeks after Medupi reached commercial operation status, its Unit 4 was extensively damaged in a hydrogen explosion, which reduced electricity generation capacity and generated over $100 million in repair. The Kusile power plant faced several significant delays and inefficiencies as well. The project was originally estimated to cost around $4.5 billion when construction began in 2008. But the latest estimates indicate that the total cost has climbed to more than $13.2 billion. The power plant also raised safety concerns and delayed with repetitive fire incidents. As of 2024, construction is still incomplete. Together, these overruns placed a heavy financial burden on Eskom, straining its budget, and forced the company to rely heavily on government bailouts and loans. Operational struggles are not limited to construction projects. Maintenance is another major source of inefficiency for Eskom. The utility company has one of the oldest fleets of power plants in the world. Many of its coal-fired plants are over 40 years old and require regular upkeep to maintain functionality. Eskom's debt poses a serious threat to South Africa's fiscal stability, as each government bailout adds strains to national finances. This escalating debt burden has led credit agencies like Moody's and S&P to downgrade the country's sovereign rating, driving up borrowing costs across both public and private sectors. To grasp the full scope of Eskom's debt crisis, let's dive into the financial health of the company to uncover more details about it. Despite receiving repeated government bailouts, Eskom remains on shaky financial ground. Its debt has reached seemingly unsustainable levels, posing a serious risk to South Africa's economy. As of 2023, Eskom's total debt burden stood at an alarming $25 billion. This debt is a mix of loans from local and international sources, government-backed bonds, and other financial tools used to fund infrastructure projects, daily operations, and the rising cost of debt servicing. Roughly $18 billion of this debt is backed by government guarantees, highlighting the state's dependence on Eskom for energy stability while also exposing it to significant financial risks. Unpaid municipal debt, totaling around $4.5 billion, further strains the company's finances as many municipalities struggle to pay for the electricity they consume. In 2023, Eskom reported an after-tax loss of $1.3 billion, more than double its loss in 2022. The financial crisis is clearly getting worse. To address the utility company's challenges, the South African government has introduced several interventions, including debt relief packages aimed at stabilizing the company's finances. Last year, the government committed to a $14 billion debt relief plan over 3 years. $4.5 billion for 2024, $3.7 billion for 2025, and $2.3 billion for 2026. Additionally, the government plans to fully assume up to $4 billion of Eskom's debt by 2026 to provide the utility company with the financial breathing room it needs to maintain and improve operations. However, they also strain the national budget, raising concerns over fiscal sustainability and impacting South Africa's sovereign credit rating. To enhance long-term viability, the government is also working to unbundle Eskom into separate entities: generation, transmission, and distribution. This restructuring is intended to improve efficiency and encourage private investment in South Africa's electricity sector. Eskom's debt and inefficiencies tell a grim story, but these issues didn't emerge in isolation. Much more lies hidden in the shadows, where backroom deals, misused funds, and kickbacks run unchecked. In this next episode, we'll cover the corruption thriving in the dark and the part it played in Eskom's precarious position. The story of Eskom is a complex tale of inefficiency, corruption, and political power plays. In our last episode, we broke down the company's crippling $25 billion debt and how it is putting South Africa's economy at risk. But behind this financial burden lies something even harder to accept: the staggering corruption and mismanagement that accelerated the company's fall. In this second episode of our three-part series, we're diving into the dark truth of Eskom's story: how fraud, collusion, and theft drained billions from South Africa's most vital power provider. Let's get to it. Corruption at Eskom is costing millions to South Africans every month. Former CEO Andre de Ruyter estimates that corruption drains around $55 million from the power utility. To put it into perspective, that's $660 million lost to corruption every year, close to 3% of Eskom's debt. To make matters worse, that figure might be on the conservative side. Some estimates suggest losses as high as $77 million each month. Over the course of a year, it would cost the company around $924 million. Every rand lost to corruption is a rand that can't be used to repair aging infrastructure, fund renewable energy projects, or simply keep the lights on. Eskom generates most of its power from coal-fired plants, which makes coal an essential resource for the nation's energy security. But the utility's coal supply chain is under attack from organized crime, and this is taking a huge toll on the company. So, how exactly are criminal networks impacting Eskom? Cartels have systematically infiltrated the coal supply chain, exploiting it at nearly every stage to make a profit. Their first tactic is called coal swapping. High-quality coal, carefully selected for use in Eskom's power stations, is intercepted right after it leaves the mines, just before it even reaches the plants. This valuable coal is replaced with substandard material or sometimes useless debris like rocks, which are non-combustible. The result? The coal that Eskom receives is nowhere near the quality needed for smooth and efficient energy production. And the sabotage doesn't stop there. At some mining sites, corrupt officials team up with sampling teams to create fake coal samples. These samples make it seem as if the coal meets Eskom's standards, when in reality, the supply falls far short. Essentially, Eskom ends up receiving poor quality coal, while the criminals profit from selling off the high quality supply elsewhere. Another major way corruption has infiltrated the company is through collusion and contract manipulation. Investigations have revealed that Eskom management has, in many cases, worked directly with various suppliers to manipulate contracts for personal gain. The company has been paying grossly inflated prices for routine goods and services, often 10 times more than their actual market rates. One outrageous example is the purchase of a simple mop, which should cost only $6 but was billed at an astonishing $11,000. Another purchase includes knee guards marked up to $4,000. These price hikes may sound absurd, but they've become routine. showing just how ingrained procurement fraud has become within Eskom. But what allows all this to happen? The company's procurement system itself has significant structural flaws. These issues go back over a decade, starting with a costly initiative known as the Back to Basics program, which aimed to address operational inefficiencies but failed to curb the real problem: poor oversight and accountability. The procurement process at Eskom has been left vulnerable, allowing fraudulent contracts to pass without proper review. One family saw this and started to drain billions of dollars from the company. The story of corruption at Eskom cannot be told without addressing the central role of the Gupta family. In South Africa, that name is synonymous with one of the country's biggest corruption cases, known as the state capture scandal. With close ties to former President Jacob Zuma, the Gupta family orchestrated a sophisticated scheme to control and loot Eskom. For nearly a decade, the aim was simple: secure lucrative contracts through manipulation, fraud, and political influence. While the allegations against the Gupta family are staggering, it's crucial to understand that they didn't operate in isolation. They built an extensive network of influence and loyalty within the company. It included strategic appointments of loyalists in key positions at Eskom, such as former CEO Brian Molefe and CFO Anoj Singh. These individuals played pivotal roles in facilitating the Gupta's access to lucrative contracts, particularly through their company, Tegeta Exploration and Resources. Tegeta gained access to Eskom's procurement system, allowing the Guptas to push through contract after contract, all engineered for profit. And in 2016, one of the most infamous contracts linked to the Guptas was pushed through. Tegeta bought the Optimum coal mine, and Eskom advanced $37 million to finance the acquisition of the mine. Despite its irregularities, this deal exemplified a larger pattern of corruption that permeated the utility's operations, showing how the Guptas exploited their connections to manipulate procurement processes. Yet the deal went through, granting the Guptas a long-term coal supply contract with Eskom, which enabled them to charge exorbitant rates for poor-quality coal. And the family didn't stop at coal. They used South Africa's broad-based black economic empowerment policies to position their companies under the guise of supporting economic transformation. This maneuver helped them win tenders meant for genuine suppliers, leaving Eskom with bloated contracts, poor-quality coal, and crippling costs. The scandal reached the highest levels of government, with former President Jacob Zuma allegedly manipulating Eskom's leadership to favor the Guptas. The utility company became a captive entity, bleeding billions in fraudulent contracts that benefited private interests. As corruption festered within Eskom, it manifested most dramatically in two of the largest coal-fired power plants in the world, which became breeding grounds for mismanagement and fraud. The solution to South Africa's energy crisis turned into a disaster, and corruption played a central role in it. Both Kusile and Medupi were initially budgeted at around $4.5 and $4.6 billion respectively. However, by 2020, the cost of these projects had skyrocketed. Kusile alone was estimated to be $4.3 billion over budget, and both projects were delayed by several years. Why these massive overruns? Rampant corruption, inflated contracts, and fraud. With a green light from Eskom's management, contractors were accused of inflating prices, from materials to labor. In one shocking case, the Swiss engineering firm ABB admitted to paying bribes to secure $200 million worth of contracts at Kusile. After investigations, ABB faced significant fines, paying $307 million in penalties for its role in the corruption. Other contractors like Tubular Construction Projects also came under scrutiny for securing $77 million in contracts through bribes and kickbacks. Corruption at Eskom has left an indelible mark, not only on the utility but on South Africa's economy and society as a whole. Load shedding became a daily reality, with rolling blackouts affecting businesses, schools, and households across the country. Eskom's rising debt burden has generally meant higher electricity prices for ordinary South Africans. Thankfully, the country has made significant progress in reducing load shedding in 2024, but the situation remains somewhat precarious. Investigations and reforms are underway, but the path to rebuilding Eskom and restoring energy security in South Africa will be long and difficult. From state capture to political interference at every level, Eskom's crisis cannot be fully understood without examining the political dynamics at play. In the final episode of this series, we will turn our focus to understand the political games at Eskom and how politics sabotage South Africa's biggest power supply. South Africa plunges into darkness as rolling blackouts cripple the nation.
There's no electricity. The robot is not working.
Eskom, the state-owned power utility, is at the center of this crisis. In the two previous episodes, we've explored its financial woes and corruption scandals. Now, it's time to uncover the political games that brought Africa's largest electricity producer to its knees. How did backroom deals and power plays sabotage South Africa's power supply and leave millions in the dark? Let's get to it. The arrival of democracy in 1994 shook South Africa's foundations, promising a fresh start after decades of oppression. With the African National Congress launched into power and apartheid dismantled, South Africa entered a new age of governance, brimming with promises of equality and progress. But translating lofty ideals into tangible results was easier said than done, especially for state-owned enterprises like Eskom. Overnight, the ANC found itself responsible for everything from economic policies to state-owned businesses, central to the party's nation-building agenda. These entities had once been the backbone of apartheid economic exclusion. Now they were tasked with driving inclusive growth. Eskom, the crown jewel of the utility sector, embodied this transformation mission. The party's vision was to expand access to electricity for millions of previously marginalized South Africans. Enters the cadre deployment policy, ANC's brainchild for aligning public service leadership with its political agenda. The logic behind the policy was simple: fill leadership positions with party loyalists to align public services with government objectives. On paper, it promised ideological cohesion, but in practice it turned into blatant political patronage, where loyalty trumped expertise. The cadre deployment policy turned Eskom's boardroom into a microcosm of party politics. A prime example was the appointment of Brian Molefe as CEO. While politically connected, Molefe's experience in managing a utility of Eskom's scale was questionable at best. His tenure, although marked by a push to stabilize finances, coincided with questionable procurement contracts, including those with the infamous Gupta family. This further entangled the utility in allegations of state capture covered in our last episode. This appointment, and many others, exemplify the preference for party-aligned figures over technically qualified experts. So, critical infrastructure issues were overshadowed by ideological debates, and decision-making became more about balancing factional interests. This led to a significant erosion of Eskom's operational expertise. The cadre deployment policy resulted in crumbling technical experience, escalating operational chaos, and financial scandals that bled Eskom dry. Over time, this led to infrastructure mismanagement and maintenance backlogs, severely impacting power generation capabilities, and the political appointees facilitated questionable contracts and poor procurement practices. Eskom's management became reactionary, responding to short-term demands rather than implementing long-term solutions. As rolling blackouts plunged neighborhoods into darkness, an unsettling irony emerged. The party that had electrified millions of homes was now struggling to keep the lights on. The cadre deployment policy might have set Eskom on a rocky path, but political interference ensured the journey was nothing short of chaotic. Over the years, ministers tasked with overseeing Eskom repeatedly inserted themselves into its operations, often prioritizing political objectives over the utility's technical, financial, and strategic needs. Minister Pravin Gordhan of Public Enterprises, for example. His involvement brought layers and layers of complexity. Tasked with reforming the utility, Gordon's approach often turned into micromanagement. Decisions on executive appointments and operational strategies frequently required his direct approval, leaving Eskom's leadership with little room to maneuver. This heavy-handed oversight slowed down decision-making and stifled the independence necessary for implementing much-needed reforms. These interventions created a leadership environment trapped in political tug-of-war. And then there's the saga of André de Ruyter. With the resignation of Jacob Zuma in 2018, Cyril Ramaphosa assumed the presidency, promising to root out corruption and reform state-owned enterprises. Ramaphosa's administration quickly realized that Eskom's $25 billion debt was a ticking time bomb threatening to blow up investor confidence, as public trust was already gone. To this end, the president's early promises included unbundling Eskom into 3 distinct entities for generation, transmission, and distribution. He also pledged to address Eskom's unsustainable debt and operational challenges by enforcing strict governance standards and accountability measures. However, implementing these reforms proved challenging. Resistance popped up faster than Eskom could produce megawatts. Inside the utility, entrenched interests dug in their heels, while outside, labor unions, scared that restructuring efforts would lead to job losses and pave the way for privatization, exerted significant pressure with strikes and protests. Within the ANC, some members opposed reducing state influence over Eskom, making it difficult for Ramaphosa to enact policies aimed at reducing corruption and increasing transparency. While the administration acknowledged the need for diversification away from coal, this pivot faced significant opposition from political factions with ties to the coal sector, further stalling necessary transitions. Appointed in 2020, André de Ruyter took on the challenging role of Eskom CEO with a clear mandate: drive financial and operational reforms. His tenure was marked by bold attempts to boost efficiency, root out corruption, and steer Eskom toward renewable energy, a tall order for a utility buried in debt and riddled with scandals. Unfortunately, his objective of cracking down on corruption brought him into direct conflict with politically connected individuals who benefited from Eskom's procurement processes. The new CEO's vision also collided with the Minister of Energy's unwavering commitment to coal. Gwede Mantashe, a self-proclaimed coal fundamentalist, accused Eskom's CEO of actively agitating for the overthrow of the state by forcing planned load shedding on South Africans. De Ruyter, in return, claimed that Mantashe, a former leader of the National Union of Mine Workers, was selling the country short by blocking the transition to green energy. The minister argued that South Africa's reliance on coal could not be abandoned without catastrophic economic consequences. The different views on energy policy delayed critical renewable projects, disrupted funding approvals, and left Eskom unable to fully embrace alternative energy sources. Even as Eskom faced mounting pressure to transition towards renewable energy, Mantashe remained steadfast in his commitment to coal. In 2020, he actively pushed for continued investment in coal-fired power plants, citing again the economic importance of coal mining and its role in sustaining jobs, particularly in unionized sectors. While politically convenient, this stance directly contradicted Eskom's need to diversify energy production and adopt cleaner, more cost-effective technologies. This lack of political backing severely undermined de Ruyter's authority as he faced allegations of sabotage within Eskom's infrastructure. Following his resignation, he made statements implicating high-level government officials in Eskom-related corruption. This explosive revelation revealed the depth of the corruption challenges and exposed the difficulties of reforming an institution as entrenched in political interests as Eskom. In recent months, Eskom's situation has shown significant improvement. The utility has achieved 184 consecutive days of uninterrupted power supply. This is a dramatic turnaround from the frequent load shedding experienced in previous years. The energy availability factor, a key measure of Eskom's performance, has improved as well, and there has been a significant reduction in unplanned outages. The utility company has increased its planned maintenance thanks to the government's debt relief package, which also helped reduce equipment failures. While the situation has improved dramatically, caution remains. As we reflect on Eskom's saga, one can't help but appreciate the resilience of South Africans. They found ways to thrive despite the darkness. From entrepreneurial candle makers to small-scale solar pioneers, the Rainbow Nation once again shown ingenuity and adaptability. If you like this episode, you may like to learn about other businesses in Southern Africa. Check out our dedicated playlist here. Also, dear associates, give me your feedback on this long series format. Thank you for your time and thanks for watching.